I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Dave Kracke. You know, you think if all I told you about him is that he's a lawyer. Is this better? Okay, I'll start again. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Dave Kracke. And you would think that if all you knew about him is that he was a lawyer and a duck, anything else. Turns out that he's a lot more than that. He's actually a Pac-12 baby. I first found him on Willamette Week, and I'll send the link out to the article. It's about the lack of rehabilitation beds in the state of Oregon, and it's a bit of a crime, and he was listed there. Dave Kracke is probably the leading authority on traumatic brain injuries from a policy standpoint, and is working with the legislature on a number of bills. And he's here to talk about head injuries and the policy issues around them. So please give a warm East Portland Rotary welcome to Dave Kracke.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Rotarians. I really appreciate this opportunity. I was just telling Ron that last time I was in this room was in the fall, and my team and I were doing brain injury screenings at a veteran stand down, the first time in the history of the state that we were doing brain injury screening for our veterans at a veteran stand down. Really, really pleased to be back in this room that had so many good memories for me. As Ron mentioned, my name is Dave Kracke. I am Oregon's Brain Injury Advocate Coordinator. This is a position that was created pursuant to or as a result of the Governor's Task Force on Traumatic Brain Injury, one of their 8 recommendations. My background, as Ron mentioned, is primarily focused on policy issues related to brain injury. Prior to my accepting the position in 2018 to be Oregon's Brain Injury Advocate Coordinator, I was a practicing litigator, represented people with brain injuries, among other things, in various legal needs, whether they were administrative, business, or personal. This is a list of some of the things that I have done in the past. I was a member of the Brain Injury Alliance of Oregon when Ralph Conrad burst in and said, we have to do something. Ralph's son, Max, of Max's Law, was concussed while playing football down in Waldport, and then was allowed to play football the following weekend, the following Friday, where he was concussed in a very, very minor hit. We've all seen the game films, those of us who have, and you can't really even tell that something happened. But that second concussion, while his brain was still recovering from the first concussion, led to a cascade of neurologic and other tragedies and disease injury processes that left him unconscious for 4 months and then permanently disabled ever since. I'm going to talk about a number of these bills as we move forward through this presentation, and I'm going to do my best to get through them. As usual, I have probably added too much material for the amount of time that we have. Very basically, a brain injury can be either traumatic or acquired. An acquired brain injury is one that occurs after birth, and that's an important distinction for our statutory or our legislative purposes for a bill that we have going right now. And causes may include, as indicated, trauma, stroke, infection, tumor, hypoxia, exposure to toxins. The word that's associated with brain injury more than anything is traumatic. And in fact, people will say TBI when discussing just the general brain injury. And that's very, very natural because it's really what we experience, what we understand to be a brain injury in terms of mechanism of injury. And the CDC back in 2015 did their best to identify what a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, is. And they say in that quote, oh, did I lose? Did I? There we go. What did I do? Sorry about that, you guys. Now, one more. I think. There we go. Thanks. TBI is caused by a bump, a blow, or jolt to the head, or a penetrating head injury that disrupts the normal function of the brain. Important to recognize that the effects may be temporary or permanent. Severity can range from mild to severe. I personally don't think that there is such thing as a mild traumatic brain injury. It's a medical nomenclature, however, used to designate kind of concussion, that lower level brain injury. That being said, I think it's somewhat of an insult to tell someone with a brain injury, don't worry, it's just a mild brain injury. You know, our brain, where would we be without our brains? It's kind of obviously a rhetorical question, because the brain is the control center of everything, including as we delve down into things such as consciousness and self-awareness. I mean, it truly is that which allows us to work together, to be together, to communicate with each other, to understand this world that we live in. Obviously, in my mind, it's the most important organ in the body, in our world, and it's one that if we aren't paying attention to it, we're really missing the boat. Concussion is a brain injury, and multiple brain injuries or multiple concussions, traumatic brain injuries, do have a cumulative effect, and that is important as well as we get further in this discussion. Leading causes of brain injuries or traumatic brain injuries include falls, the biggest slice of that pie, especially for older adults. It's something that we all have to be aware of. I'm 62 this year, and really heading toward that demographic of being susceptible to falls. And as a result, it's really important for all of us to take as many preventative measures along those lines as possible to avoid it, because they can have really significant effect for our elder population. Assaults, a large factor, traffic collisions, and then sporting events, and then finally the other category is also very big, meaning that brain injuries can happen almost anywhere and at any time. It's a nonpartisan issue. It doesn't respect demographics. It doesn't respect income level. It literally can happen to anyone, anytime, and it changes your life or the person's life in an instant. And it's important to recognize that the effect is not just with the person with the brain injury. The effect is also with those concentric circles that go out from that person in terms of their loved ones, their friends, their community, their work community, and so on. Because once a person's brain is injured to the extent that it causes significant problems, everybody within those concentric circles is affected. For my money, most notably, it's the partner, the spouse, the close loved one who also all of a sudden becomes that caregiver. And to be thrust into a caregiver role when in the morning you were just a loving partner, spouse, and then in the afternoon you are thrust into the role of caregiver, that can really be a jolt, a really difficult process, and many of our friends have been and are still living in that role. This slide indicates kind of the various domains that a brain injury will manifest itself with, and you'll have the cognitive on the upper left, where you have difficulty with speech and language, organization, attention, learning, memory, hearing. The emotional aspects of a brain injury can be incredibly significant because they really, they do have serious negative effect on the emotional regulatory system, the inability to control things such as depression, anxiety, irritability, mood swings, blunted emotions. Quick to anger is another one that, I guess that's in the behavioral comment there, and it can lead to all sorts of problems because there is this disinhibition, anger control that can stem directly from a brain injury that can lead someone to doing things that render them or make them become justice involved. Physical, slowed movement, coordination, headaches, balance, fatigue, vision, general pain. This became really apparent down in the Capitol about a month ago. I was with a brain injury survivor whose book featured in the Willamette Week article, a young man named Dave Nichols. Dave was severely brain injured in a rock climbing fall, and he is unable to get downstairs. We were on the second floor of the Capitol on the house side, and the fire alarm went off. The elevators instantly shut down. Everybody is required to scream down these stairs. Well, Dave had no way to get down those stairs. And luckily there was a security personnel there. He was able to procure a special chair. They had one chair in the entire house wing. We were able to strap him in. We slid, it had kind of tank tread on it. We slid him down the stairs, down these two different flights of stairs, pushed him out of the Capitol, across the street to where everybody, the legislators, staff, visitors, lobbyists, were all standing. At that point, the return to the building alarm sounded. Well, that demonstrated for us the need. We have a guy with mobility problems. He can't get downstairs because of his brain injury, but there was absolutely no way for him to get down those stairs either. And arguably, I mean, thankfully it was not, it was a drill, but if it was a critical situation, a fire, an earthquake, whatever, he would have been really left to his own devices. 2 weeks later, we went down to do some additional work on Senate Bill 420, which we'll talk about soon. There were 17 of those chairs now throughout the Capitol, one at each stairwell, on each floor, on both sides, both the Senate and the House side. The need was identified and resources were applied to fill that need. I'm really proud of what the Capitol security did to make sure that now there are enough chairs for people with mobility issues to get out in the event of an emergency. Brain injury intersects with all, I will say that, with all of our social problems that are unfortunately plaguing Portland and beyond. The studies demonstrate that there is a correlation of 70% of our homeless people experiencing homelessness have a history of brain injury, 70%. If that person happens to be, if that homeless person is a veteran, that statistic goes up to 93%. And the majority of those injuries predate their homelessness. So this is a situation where they're either precariously housed or they're living month to month. They get in a car collision, suffer a brain injury, can't go back to work, don't pay the rent, get evicted, have nowhere else to go, end up on the streets. And the streets themselves are problematic in terms of assaults, exposure to substance use disorders, or exposure to substances, which can lead to substance use disorder and the like. If we ignore brain injury when trying to deal with these societal ills that are out there, we're really doing a disservice and we're not addressing a huge part of the problem. This is just a slide that illustrates what I just said. 71% of the sampled individuals experiencing homelessness reported a history of brain injury, and 74% of those reported that the injury occurred prior to their experiencing homelessness. We are in contact, I personally and my team, we are working with the governor's office, we are working with legislators, we're working with county commissioners, city commissioners, trying to get them to understand this link and to allocate resources for the treatment of brain injury to address our social ills. Brain injury and intimate partner violence, domestic violence, is also a huge correlation. 61.2% of women were positive for brain injury when these brain injury screenings were completed for abused women. 92% of those reported one or more brain injuries related to domestic violence, or 92% of those reported too many injuries to quantify. Terrible situation. It's obviously it has many factors, but if we ignore the brain injury in terms of how that's affecting the people who are the victims of intimate partner violence, we do so at our peril. This statistic, or this quotation from a study, is extremely disturbing. Number of women who have a brain injury inflicted by a violent partner are estimated to be staggeringly high, higher than NFL players or those who were injured in military service. Again, brain injury touches so many of our terrible areas or difficult problems that we're all facing. In 2019, we did a survey at the Center on Brain Injury Research and Training, CBERT, that's at the University of Oregon, my direct employer. And we found that the average Oregonian with a brain injury needs 12 distinct services and supports on average, and that 48% of those do not get the support because they are not aware of those services. And that the word aware, or the two words not aware, really is the focus of this legislation, Senate Bill 420, that I'll be talking about. The graphic there indicates just a few of those areas where those struggles occur. And they're not all medical. That's the one thing, or therapeutic. That's the one thing to really remember. Brain injury affects your entire life. So you've got therapeutic and medical concerns, of course, but you also have public benefits, spousal support, transportation, legal assistance, case management, and many, many others. So while the common tendency is to think, well, a person with a brain injury merely needs better doctor care, better therapeutic care. In reality, a person with a brain injury, again, we're talking about the control center, they have difficulty with all of these aspects of life that we take for granted. One of the big ones, I just mentioned it, is transportation. Oftentimes they can't drive anymore, but they still have to get to appointments. They have to get wherever they're going. And so luckily there are some transportation services out there that do a great job. But again, if we don't advise these folks or let them know that these services are there to let them access the services, they won't be able to access them, and they won't benefit from that. And one of the real problems, or really tragic outcomes of a brain injury, is this tendency to kind of hibernate, this tendency to isolate, tendency to kind of shut yourself off from the world because things just don't make sense anymore. There's confusion issues, you're self-conscious, you're embarrassed. And so rather than ask for help, people will kind of just self-isolate, and that can be a real problem. This follow-up bar graph indicates that this is not only an urban issue. It's not just a white issue. It affects people who are not white. It affects people who are in rural communities. In fact, those discrepancies or the lack of access is even greater in some of the more underserved populations. And so when you add up the yes but not enough or no with regard to where the needs met, look in that rural column, the second from the right, and you see that it's just an incredibly significant problem throughout the state. Luckily, we are working with people throughout the state. I think I mentioned in Bend yesterday at the veteran stand down there. Maybe I didn't mention it to the group, working with brain injured veterans, and we'll be organizing a workshop down there to help coordinate resources for those brain injured veterans. We're doing the same thing next month on May 19th down in Curry County with the great support of newly appointed Representative Court Boyce and the Senator down there, David Brock Smith, and many other incredibly wonderful volunteers and brain injury specialists in that community. Senate Bill 20, very unfortunate Senate bill number. I'm going to lobby to have that number retired. I don't think that's fair, but it will bring brain injury resource navigation to Oregon. Oregon is one of 11 states without this type of bill, without this type of office. It will be housed at the Department of Human Services. It will be live people, live navigators who a brain injury survivor or their loved one can call them and explain kind of where they are, what their needs are, who they are, all of this kind of personal information that will help that navigator guide them to support and services, resources that are out there. One of the most important resources is, in my mind, is really similar to what you guys do. And that is social support. That is the peer support. That is knowing that you're not alone and being able to tell your story to people who are similarly situated. And so we have some wonderful peer support groups, some brain injury support groups in the state, but oftentimes people have no idea how to access them. And so what this office will do is it will provide a essentially central clearinghouse where someone can contact them, connect with the navigator, be directed to resources, but not just in an information and referral to standpoint, actually what we call a warm handoff, where the navigator will actually work with the person and connect them personally, literally personally, to that support and service provider, and then we'll follow up with that brain injury survivor to make sure that those services stuck. And that follow-up is really important. I'm lucky in my position. I work with some of the best advocates and best folks working in this area across the country. So the good news is that we have the program manuals, we have the employee manuals, we know what these guys do and the best practices for instance, in Colorado, in Minnesota, in Iowa, in Arkansas, and we're going to be able to employ those, bring those operational documents right into DHS. And in other words, we are not going to be reinventing the wheel. Now, Senate bill, these are some of the just kind of the background of what Senate Bill 420 is in a nutshell. We have chief sponsors, including Senator Deb Patterson, Representative Courtney Neeren, Senator Taylor, Senator Manning. We have others, and then we have regular sponsors throughout. I'm very, very honored that we have such wide support, bipartisan support, I should say, throughout the legislature. This slide talks about brain injury resource navigators. Again, real people making real connections, not merely information and referral, the warm handoff, person-centered, geographically relevant. This is, I wrote this bill. And so this is, the geographic relevance was really important to me because if we tell someone down in Klamath Falls that all they have to do is pop on up to Portland to, you know, attend this or attend that, we literally might as well be saying all you have to do is head to the moon. I mean, a person with a brain injury has a hard time getting around the city, let alone getting around some 300-mile journey from Klamath Falls to Portland. So one of the big challenges, or one of the big opportunities, is a better way to look at it, is to figure out what those resources are in those particular areas. And for instance, when I was in Bend yesterday at this veteran stand down, the whole room was filled with service providers. So I made a point to go through and talk to every single one of those service providers, collect their information, make my connections with them. And now we have a really solid resource network that we can build on when we do the brain injury workshop down there in about a month and a half. This slide, I'll kind of burn through it pretty quick here, but it kind of shows where we were at with the legislative process to date with Senate Bill 420. We were literally the first bill heard in front of the Senate Committee on Human Services. It was a wonderful hearing. The week later, we passed that committee through their work session process unanimously, which showed the bipartisan support that it enjoys. There is, of course, a fiscal impact on this because, well, we're going to have approximately 12 people working in this office. The fiscal impact is about $1.2 million per year. The good news is that we being the team at the U of O, we employed an OHSU healthcare economist to do an economic analysis on just 4 different domains, transition from Medicaid to personal insurance, transitions out of institutional care into home and community-based care, avoided psychiatric inpatient stays, and jail avoidance. And we found that just with those 4 domains, for every dollar that we pay in, we're going to get $1.60 out, just in those 4 domains. And the thing that is really important for me is that final bullet point, and that yes, we have these cost savings, economic savings, legislators love that, of course, but what they even love more is the benefit, the increase in the quality of life for those recipients of brain injury resource navigation. And that really, you know, in my experience, I've been working with people with brain injury for almost my entire career as an attorney, and now as Oregon's brain injury advocate. And that quality of life piece is really, really important. I mean, think about it for all of us. You know, what would be more important on our personal, you know, scales? I have the scale in my brain as a lawyer that, you know, the cost here, the benefit over here, and the benefit of having that high quality of life always outweighs almost everything. I've included this slide to show the widespread organizational support for Senate Bill 420. We would actually love to have the Rotary's support. We continue to circulate this, and so I can pass some information on to Ron. I don't know if you guys are in a position to even do that under your structure, but nonetheless, we have support throughout the state from the folks like Disability Rights Oregon, the Brain Rehab Network, also the Centers for Independent Living throughout the state, but also, if you might notice, we have some DAs in there. And the DAs love this as well because they understand that if we can get people the treatment that they need for their brain injury, they are much less likely to become justice involved. They're much less likely to be out there and engaging in whatever the crime is based on their cognitive and behavioral problems associated with the brain injury. This is a list of some of our individual supporters. I know you can't read it, but it just goes to show you kind of the magnitude of support throughout the state. When I was doing politics back before I was a lawyer, we would say every person who took the time to sign a letter of support was probably representative of plus or minus 400 people in the community. And I think that's about what we're looking at here as well. There are an awful lot of people that for whatever reason haven't heard of this legislative effort, haven't certainly taken the opportunity to support it, but we know they're out there and we know that they need help. So I didn't mention this actually. There are 84,000 Oregonians living with chronic effects of brain injuries. 84,000, that's 2%, 1 in 50. And then when you talk about that concentric circle, you know, maybe there's another 5 or 10 people who were affected very, very profoundly as a result. That comes out to what, 450,000 plus or minus, something like that. So this is a really big problem. The problem with brain injury is that it's called the invisible injury. And because of that, it has been in the shadows quite a bit. Did I just lose the, okay. Oh, it's not me, yay. Did we get it? Yeah, that was, yeah. Okay. Well, I will go ahead and keep talking just briefly. Hopefully it will the TV will reset. Looks like maybe we're getting a signal. I'll first talk about Max's Law, which is the nation's first enacted return to play law. I was on the team that drafted that law back in 2009. This is the law that now requires all coaches to understand concussions and to act appropriately when they believe that a player has been concussed. In a nutshell, the rule says that when a coach sees or is told about a blow to the player's head or body that results in signs, symptoms, and behaviors consistent with a concussion, that coach must remove the player from play and cannot return the player to play until at least the expiration of 24 hours and only with a release from a qualified healthcare professional. And so if any of you have kids or grandkids involved in sports, you hopefully are aware that there are these concussion protocols. You've seen them in place. As I was mentioning to Ron, I will go to high school football games just to see Max's Law in effect, to make sure that they're following it, to see it when it is being followed, and to really be grateful that it is being followed, because this is the scenario that Max Conrad found himself in, where it resulted in second impact syndrome. And this was, again, before we knew what we were doing. Max's Law, this slide, I wish you could see it, but it really goes through the chronology from 2009 to the present day. In 2009, when we passed Max's Law, and by the way, I think I mentioned it, Oregon was the first state to enact this law in the country. Within 4 years, every single state had an analogous law. Most of them used the Oregon model. Real exciting stuff for me as a policy guy to see that type of uptick or uptake across the country. But at the same time that we were passing Max's Law, that is when Roger Goodell sat in front of Congress, official testimony, Roger Goodell, the chairman, I think, of the NFL, and said that football does not cause concussions. It was also the same time that Dr. Bennett Amalu, the gentleman who the movie Concussion was based on, and Mike Webster, the Pittsburgh Steeler who died of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. He was the first. That was exactly the same time that Dr. Amalu was figuring out that there's something going on with tau protein buildup in the kind of the valleys of the brain that was leading to this really, really terrible outcome for these retired NFL players. By 2014, all states had a youth concussion law. 2015, we start seeing a real culture change in the NFL. And ongoing to this day, we have really significant penalties for targeting, including ejection and huge fines. We all, or a number of us, saw the Tua, I'm not going to butcher his last name, but the quarterback who struck during a televised game and kind of had that immediate brain injury. You'll see the physical, just that terrible clenching of his hand right there on the field. You know, these events really have a way of seeping into the popular cult or the popular awareness. Oh yeah, this is serious business. We have a lot of things going on right now. There's a push that football, full contact football, should not be happening for kids who are under the age of, some people say 14, others say 12 for various reasons. But the young male brain is really in the development process between the age of, well, birth till the age of 12. And to think that they get in there and start just subconcussive hit after subconcussive hit, we know, unfortunately, that can have some detrimental effects in some cases. So there's a lot of folks out there trying to figure out what can we do about that. And I think it's a conversation that we really have to have. Jenna's Law was the law that, with Max's Law, we limited it to high school players. Jenna's Law, we expanded it to all young players in the state of Oregon. We did that. That was a law that Dr. Chestnut, who works up here at the Rebound Clinic, he's one of the Blazers' chief brain injury doctors and orthopedic doctors. Jim and I put that law together, and that expanded the Max's Law provisions to all young athletes in the state, regardless of what league they're playing in. So now we cover the rec league, the CYO, the Portland Youth Soccer, et cetera. And really, we were able to include an education component in that law that went well beyond what we were able to do in Max's Law. And we conservatively estimate that about 100,000 Oregonians receive some sort of concussion education because of Jenna's Law. The other law that I wrote with my colleague Melissa McCart passed in 2020, one of 3 bills to get out of the session before the walkout that occurred that session, requires the development of an immediate temporary accommodations plan for concussed students returning to school. If we have a kid with a broken arm, we would never expect him to go out and play basketball. And yet before this law, we required our kids with concussions to basically jump right back into their academics and to perform at a high academic level without accommodations. The accommodations are behavioral, social, and academic. We knew that we couldn't just focus on academic because the school's life, a kid's life in school, is way bigger than just academics. And so we really came up with a lot of folks around the country saying is the best practice at this point. We were one of 11 states this time with a law, and I was able to survey all the laws and make sure that ours was the best of the best and then added to it. And Ron, I want to make sure that I'm doing okay on time. Okay, very good. So brain injury, this next slide that unfortunately you can't see, talks about the effect of brain injury on the older population in Oregon. I have a slide that talked about some of the things that we can all do. Pay attention to where we are and be in the moment, especially when we're moving. Stay in shape, focus on balance, core strength, flexibility, and vision. Hearing is also really important. A study just came out a couple weeks ago. Use assistive devices when necessary. Consult with professionals and ask for help when you need it. This is briefly into the fact that there is just not enough acute rehab facilities around that can handle this type of work. This is the focus of, or one of the large focuses of the Willamette Week article that I hope Ron will send out to all of you. And you'll take a look at that to get in a lot of detail about what that situation is like. Rotary is in a really well positioned to make a positive difference. You guys are really well respected and well known throughout the state. I talk about a thing called the Overton window, which is a kind of political theory about the fact that ultimately it is legislators who follow the people and not commonly the other way around, the way that the people commonly think. And so if we as the citizens let it be known that this is some policy that we expect, there's a really good chance that that it will actually happen. I will talk just really, in fact, I won't even talk about it. We'll just briefly about the brain injury in Oregon, the state plan that we currently have in place. And our 4 goals are to illustrate the need for brain injury resource navigation, educate and train service providers about brain injury, support brain injury screenings and accommodations programs, and then also to increase access to brain injury resource navigators statewide. My last slide is a big thank you to you guys. It does have my contact information. I'm going to ask, Ron to circulate this PowerPoint to everybody if you want to take a look at it. And then I have my reference materials at the, behind that. And that's one thing that I just love about the Siebert at the U of O, is that these guys are all PhD level researchers. Wonderful having access to that level of science and evidence and best practices. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have, and I thank you again.
Madam Rotarian President, how many questions should we allow? 2 or 3. Okay, I have just a quick one. Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, any of those related crossover a bit into brain injury?
Absolutely. Those are considered more in the acquired brain injury disease process. And we did not, when it was time to define brain injury in the statute, we defined it as brain injury, not traumatic brain injury, not acquired brain injury. We know that we will have resources, be able to direct people to resources related to dementia, Parkinson's, et cetera. And so if someone finds themselves needing that type of direction, we do not want them to be somehow turned away because they didn't get injured in a car or something along those lines. Absolutely, that is contemplated as part of the information that will be imparted under Senate Bill 420.
Dave, you showed a list of names of people who are supporting Senate Bill 420. What group would you go to if you wanted to add your name to that list or learn more about 420?
Thank you very much. That would be to me or to my organization, to my team, and I will forward you both the organizational support letter and the individual support letter. And please, if you are so inclined, please sign up. It's very easy. Kind of, we created a very easy Qualtrics type of system. You click the button, yes, you type in your name, and you hit send, and that's really what it is. So yes, if you want to do that, Ron, I'll get that over to you, and you can circulate it. We would love whatever support you guys would be able to offer.
Looks like we have a question from Sandy and Aaron online, so we'll go with Aaron first.
Hi, how's it going? Quick question over here regarding post-brain injury recovery. I believe it was in either 2013 or 2014. Michigan State University conducted a study with some hockey players post-concussion syndrome regarding the kind of post or pre-belief that, sit in a dark room, no lights on, minimal conversation, and then that was updated to activities that would increase neuroplasticity and try to create new brain pathways. Is there any type of legislature on, changing the post-recovery?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the answer is not through the legislature, but through the administrative rules, and especially through the Oregon Student Activities Association, the OSAA. And there are well understood, well sussed out return to play protocols for young athletes. These are employed throughout youth leagues, into college leagues, and into professional leagues. And they basically, what you just said is exactly right. We have evolved from, used to be go sit in a room in the dark for days and days and days and don't do anything with your brain. We realize now that that is detrimental, that they encourage light exercise. And then there is a graduated return to play protocol that is in place. And if you go to the OSAA website, Oregon Student Activities Association website, on the website, they have return to play policies. And you can see the graduated return to play and a process that's involved. And you typically start off with very light exercise. If that creates or exacerbates or brings on brain injury symptoms, then go back to start, rest a little bit more. But we're not talking about rest in the dark, we're talking about light walking, things like that. But if you get through that first level, then you graduate up to a little bit more strenuous activity, then sort of a pre-contact level, and then finally full contact or back to normal. And anytime one of those steps leads to an exacerbation or re-upping of those signs, symptoms, or behaviors, they go back to the beginning. So yeah, the scientists, the doctors have come a long way in understanding what it means to recover from a brain injury. And quite frankly, it's really great because it's just a lot more active. So thank you.
Sandy, you have the final question. Make it short, quick, please.
Right. I may have misinterpreted some of your data about the women in shelters, and was it correct that there is more of a frequency in women having closed head injuries or traumatic brain injuries rather than even higher than our vets? And if so, what is being looked at from a legislation perspective to try to prevent that?
Yeah, those are correct stats. Again, higher than NFL players and higher than those in military service. It's just a staggering number. As far as legislation, it really comes down to the criminal code because those are clearly assault crimes. But as far what Senate Bill 420 will do, and we've worked with a lot of domestic violence groups, is we'll direct those women or those individuals, because it's not only women, to resources that can help them. But really the main thing to do at that point is to get them out of whatever that environment is and into a safe environment. And then that's the first step. And then they can access various resources. So the criminal code covers those assault and batteries. Our law will hopefully lead to connecting those folks with appropriate support services.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's hear it for our speakers.